Hey everybody, this is DH Thorne here. I have recently run into problems with my blog again. Someone decided to be a bit of a Facebook troll and start flagging my posts again as spam. Pretty sure I know who it is, so it doesn't really matter. Rather than be hassled by constantly having to deal with this, I've decided to shift more of my focus onto YouTube. This is going to mean more videos that I'm going to be shooting, and some of them I will of course be doing live with the camera, and some of them will just be narration. It really kind of depends on my mood and the time of day and so on, whether I want to set up my background and all that kind of stuff. Now, this particular video I wanted to be about a subject that's always on my mind because it comes up a lot in working with the occult with random people on the internet. And especially it's important to me because as I am developing my system to be more easily understood by others, so that I can write a book about it at some point, a manuscript, so that people can use my methods if they want, work with the entities that I work with, and so on. It occurs to me that most people don't, at least the novices don't, understand that, well, first of all, magic really isn't about what is done in the sense that the words are important or the materials are important or any of that. Recently there was a post that we were talking about on Dark Sorcery where someone had asked if a real skull was better than a fake one. And it is my opinion that yes, a real skull is going to be better than a fake one. But that doesn't necessarily mean what people think it means. It doesn't mean that certain materials are magic and some are not. What it means is certain things will affect your subconscious more than others. And when you're working magic, what you are really doing is you are creating a holistic interface between your will and the reality around you. You're creating a way for your ego's will, your ego's mind, your ego and your desires and all of these things to come together and not be in conflict, to be harmonious. And it requires a mind, body, spirit holistic approach. You need to have a physical element, which would be the body. That could be your body physically, that could be the world, that could be items in the world. Your mind, which is your intellect, your conscious decisions, and the spirit, which would be the ideals, the ideas, the energies that are behind everything, that move everything. I often say that material reality is substance without form, and the mind gives that substance a form. It calls it things, calls tables tables and chairs chairs, even though you could define them very similarly in some cases, like a bench and a table. What's the difference? So you have that, and then in the spiritual sense you have the astral world, which is basically pure spirit that has been defined by the mind as it perceives it. And you need to have a holistic approach to this. Now, why is this important with what I'm saying? If I'm creating a magic spell, okay, I am creating something based upon symbolism that my mind respects. I'm going to say that specifically, respects. It respects that symbolism. It appreciates that symbolism. It is drawn to it. It works with it. It manipulates it through it. It has a preference for it. So when I create a spell, what I am doing is I'm taking elements of ritualized symbolism and I am bringing them together, in a physical way, and then I am manipulating them both in the physical world, the mental world, and the spiritual world. And a lot of people who are new to magic, they will read a grimoire, and most grimoires do not contain this information, at least the old ones especially. This was part of, what kept things secret, I guess you could say. It wasn't really about, Eye of Newt and Hand of a Dead Man and all this other stuff. Those things were either not important or they were ways to trigger the psychic senses, or they were blinds in many cases. And blinds are ways that people would hide information in their grimoires. They were kind of like a code. So you'd be saying, I need the hand of a dead man. Well, that might not have anything to do with a dead man. It might actually be referencing something symbolic. It could just mean a skeletal hand. It might not even have to be a recently dead man. My point is that it could be symbolic, and all of these things are symbolisms. So when a novice enters into magic, they will read a grimoire and it will say, get a candle, get some incense, draw these sigils, chant these things. And, some of them will actually at least partially explain that you need to put energy into it, that you need to put emotion and intent into it. But they don't really go into great lengths to explain this, because this is one of those things that is so essential, but it's also really difficult to describe. But a lot of people will come into magic and they will see these things and they will think that that is what magic is, that it is this action that you're taking. And that is only one part of it. That is only a very, superficial part of it, I guess you could say. It's necessary. It makes magic more potent. If you try to do things purely with the astral realm, it can still work, but just like riding a bicycle with one wheel, it's just not easy. It's just not going to go anywhere, and that goes in either direction. If you have a bicycle with one wheel, whether it's the front wheel or the back wheel, I guess you could pop a wheelie on it and kind of use it like a unicycle, but you're kind of asking for trouble. It's not easy to do. So if you focus only on the material, it's kind of like only having the front wheel on a bicycle. It's probably the least effective way to ride a bicycle. And if you have only the astral, it's kind of like having only the rear wheel, and it will still work, probably better than if you only had the front wheel. I will admit that. It does seem to be that the spirit is more important than the physical. But if you don't have them all, if you don't have all three parts, the person riding the bike, the wheels, both of them, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have either a bad time or an impossible time. So when people get a grimoire, they will just kind of use the spells in the grimoire. They will just kind of work what is there, and they won't understand that those components are just words. They're just symbols. And those symbols tend to be fairly universal. Most cultures, most people around the world know what the symbolism of a candle is. Just intuitively they know. Just like they will know, most people will know what a cross kind of implies, or a pentagram, or many of these other symbols. They have meaning. A rat. We all know what a rat kind of means to people. Every culture around the world, just about, pretty much, knows kind of what a rat is, or can understand what its personality would be like. So there's symbolism out there that is fairly universal, and most spells begin with that very universal language of symbolism. But what is important here is that when you're beginning, you're going to be using these books, and you're going to be following along, and you're going to be doing what they tell you. And if you're lucky, the book will tell you how to work with energy. It will tell you that you need to learn how to meditate, and you need to learn how to enter trance states and altered states of consciousness, that those are the key. If you can't do those things, you won't have any success at all. That you need to be able to visualize or feel energy, or in some other way know what energy does. You need to be able to manipulate it with emotions, with intent, with anything else. You need to be able to pour your full intent and will and emotion into things. And they don't really go deep into that because that's very difficult to explain. But once you've reached a certain point, and for some people it doesn't take very long, once you've reached a certain point, any book of magic that you buy off the store or get from a friend or download or whatever, for the most part, once you've learned the pattern of symbolism that they're using, you can pretty much just toss the book on the fire. You don't need it anymore. Once you understand how their approach to magic works, you can do away with the whole thing. It's not a formula. This is not a cookbook. It's not a recipe book. It doesn't work that way. That doesn't mean you shouldn't at first try to use those formulas. It just means that at some point you need to do away with them. And this is where I get into what I describe as my magic versus your magic. If I create a grimoire, if I create a manual of magic, if I create anything like that, it will help the beginner, because that's my intent. I'm going to be trying to find symbolism that will be fairly universal to people that they can use. And it may be repeated information. A lot of the things that I might talk about are things that everybody does. This is not hidden information anymore. And not many people have new ways of doing things, maybe just novel ways of arranging them, but it's still kind of the same ideas over and over again. So if I create a book like this, if I go into giving people spells, what am I giving you? Am I giving you magic spells, or am I giving you my magic? And this is where it gets kind of, separates the dabbler from the actual sorcerer. And you will begin to realize that you need to create your own magic, your own spells. Based on symbols, you need to base it on other symbolism, other people's methods. If you might want to use candle magic, you might want to use knotted cord magic, you might want to use, poppets, you might want to use, jars, you might want to use demons, you might want to use just all kinds of things, really. But my point is that these symbols and these methods, they are really just ways to tweak your subconscious mind to get through your conscious mind, to bypass your conscious mind, or at least to align all of these elements together so that you can bring the spiritual focus into what you're trying to do and have them all work in harmony. In a way, and in fact, it's probably not just in a way. I think it's in a very specific and true way. Magic is a kind of is a kind of yoga. If anyone understands the meaning of the word yoga and how it was used traditionally and what it really is supposed to mean, yoga, as Crowley was famous for repeating over and over again, yoga means union, and magic is union. Magic is a union of mind, body, and spirit. And this is why yoga works for so many people in the modern world, because it really is a union of mind, body, spirit. A lot of people, especially in the West, we kind of lose this idea of holistic unification of our total trinity of self, as I call it. We lose a lot of that. A lot of us will just kind of, I meditate. Well, when you meditate, do you do any postures? Do you do any mudras? Do you do any exercise? Do you get up and go to the gym? Do you do it all together? If you ever take any, even just basic levels of yoga or anything like that, the real thing, I don't mean the yoga pants crap, I mean the real thing, you will find, and I'm not an expert in this by any means, but you will find, like if you're trying to raise Kundalini or anything like that it requires you to do physical actions, mental actions, and spiritual actions all at the same time. You're supposed to adopt postures, you're supposed to flex muscles and breathe, and you're supposed to visualize, and you're supposed to feel the energy, and you're supposed to know the energy and feel it going through you. Magic works exactly like this, except it's not just postures or dance or movement or mudra. It is sigils made out of ink and paper. It is sigils made out of ritualized actions. It is materials in the real world. And what you need to realize is the material components are extremely important. They are not maybe quite as important as the astral, but it's kind of like 60-40, with the material being a 40. You absolutely have to, in my opinion, use physical materials on some level to affect physical change in the real world, to at least be more likely to create physical change in the real world. One could say this is, due to the chaos theory effect, the chaos effect of magic, of reality, where if you, do something, like if you drop a pebble in a pond, you cause ripples that reach throughout the pond, and it's just a pebble, it's not like a big brick or something. You just use a pebble, and you can, the waves will reach for miles, technically. They'll go for great long distances. Of course they dissipate, but they'll reach very far. And magic is like this, or it's like dominoes. There's a guy on YouTube who I am subscribed to, I listen to occasionally now, who I believe his name is Frank White. He's got a channel, I think it's called Grail of the Serpent. He talks a lot about what I'm talking about, and it's one of the reasons I followed him was because he pretty much sees magic the same way I do, more or less, and he's a very interesting person. But he will tell you that it's like the idea of knocking down dominoes. Magic is the act of fingering that first domino and having it fall over. That is what magic does, and then that first domino collides into the next, and so on. And this causes this kind of, I forget what they call it, the Rube Goldberg machine effect. It's kind of, everything starts to happen, and next thing you know, out of a clear blue sky, you'll have a synchronicity event that signifies your magical spell has manifested. And that's something we'll talk about perhaps another time, but synchronicity is very important. If you are not aware of what that is, you need to become aware of it, because the vast majority of magical manifestation in my life takes place with some element of synchronicity involved. These uncanny coincidences that often have meaning behind them, these kind of omen-like coincidences that to other people will just seem like a random coincidence, but to you has meaning. To you they mean something. You know they do when they happen. Kind of like if you're talking about a movie to your spouse or your friend or something that you haven't seen in a few years, and you're saying, wow, that was a good movie, I wouldn't mind seeing that sometime. And that night while you're watching TV, there's an ad for that movie coming on at 8 o'clock, that's a movie that hasn't been on in the movies in a long time, that kind of thing, like an old movie or something, just out of a clear blue sky. And neither one of you have seen commercials for it. It's the first you're aware of it, but you thought of it. Now, That's just a coincidence. But then there's the uncanny, spooky coincidence where maybe there was something more, something more to it. This is where it gets hard to explain, because you kind of have to look up Carl Jung to really get it, because he puts it in better words than I will. But you'll have these coincidences that have deeper meaning behind them, and they have deeper meaning. Maybe you're kind of worried about your mother or some family member or something, and you'll be watching television, and some movie will come on that was a movie that your mother and you, or your friend and you, or something like that used to watch together all the time, and it'll give you this like, I wonder if I should call them, and you start thinking about your specific family member or something, and then they call you. They call you on the phone. That's kind of a synchronistic event. Things like that. They're kind of like those spooky, like, I wonder what's going on. So these things happen, and this is kind of how things manifest. But this works this way because of the holistic mind-body-spirit connection in magic, and it won't work if you don't have this, and it won't work if all you're doing is using someone else's spell. When people ask me for a spell, I often tell them, here's what I got, but you're probably going to have to modify this and change it to fit you better. There's a reason why magic is so hard to prove. There's a lot of reasons for this. I have some other working theories on this. But one of them is that most people just have no idea what it really is. They think it's like in Hollywood, or they think it's a mechanical operation. They think of magic like a vending machine. You put in spiritual energy, you put in spirit coins basically, and you pull the lever and you get your candy bar of magic. And it doesn't work that way. This isn't how it works at all. It's not a formula, and it is not something repeatable. This is why science couldn't test for it the same way they can test for other things. It is a very subtle and a very erratic and a very chaotic energy, force, and nature of reality. And it always works, by way of what I call the path of least rational resistance. And I'm going to probably do a video just about that subject at some point. But the basic concept is that magic will not defy reality. It will not defy the laws of nature. It will work within the laws of nature, and you'll have a synchronistic event that will be totally rational and explainable through mundane means. But you will know that it is not just a coincidence. You will know that it is not just something that happened, surprise, surprise, according to the exact will of your spells. But it is not necessarily 100% reliable either, because magic, and this is where we get into another very big part of it that Crowley got 100% correct, was magic follows your truest will. It does not follow what you tell it. It follows what your truest will is. And if you truly want something, and it doesn't mean what you desire from your ego, it means if you truly, your true self desires this thing, then you're going to get this thing regardless of what your spell says. If you cast a spell for someone to be killed in retribution for something they've done to you, that's all well and good, but more than likely, this spell is going to go with what your truest will is. And your truest will is probably just to be rid of that person or to punish them and see them suffer somehow. So, this is why you can have different levels of success in magic. But it again goes back to why something is my magic might not work for you, because I might make a spell that is for, we'll say, killing someone or something like that, to do harm to someone, and it will have a very specific imagery in mind, a very specific symbolism in mind, and that includes the intent of the spell. Your intent is so important. This is such a key thing, and looking through a grimoire for a spell that kills, versus a spell that just gets revenge, or something, these are broad categories and broad distinctions, and you have to work the magic with the same intent that the magic was created. And if you don't know what that is, or if it's loosely connected, your success will be even more limited. So if I create a spell, it's going to be with my symbolism, my intent, and my rationalization behind it, and it may not work for you at all. You may be from a different culture or a different kind of mindset completely, and everything that I do that works for me 100% of the time will work for you maybe 20% of the time, or never at all. Maybe I like to use pillar candles and you want to use taper candles. Maybe I think that the demons as they are described in the Goetia sound silly, so I visualize them with a little bit more of a rational, kind of cool, artistic flair, and it works for me, but it might not work for you. You might need to visualize them as the Goetia describes them. Everything really is up to you, and it has to be your magic. You need to create your magic out of the symbols that you understand, not out of the ones that I understand, not out of the ones that I make up, not out of the ones that I believe in. These are only meant to serve as guides, as a framework that you will build upon. So when I do release magic spells, which I do occasionally, I release rituals and things that people can use. When I release these, they are made with the most generic symbolism that I can think of that gets across the message. And it is up to you to create more symbolism or more mental energy to go with it. You cannot do the spell. For example, I have a spell to break the binding that is placed on you by another sorcerer or wizard or whatever you want to call them, whatever goofy name you like to use. Whatever it is, these people will sometimes place binding hexes on you, binding spells on you, or ways to hamper you or to keep you attracted to them or anything like that. Well, this spell I created is very simple. It requires the use of a leather cord, some candles, invoking a demon, and following the procedure. And when you do that, you're supposed to be visualizing and pushing all of your energy into this working and gathering the threads of the enemy's force, and putting them into that. It's, the leather cord is a symbol of the binding power that's been put on you, and when you break that little leather cord or burn it or whatever, it is very clear to your subconscious what you're doing, and your subconscious, your mind, body, and spirit will work together to destroy the magic that's been put against you, and it will destroy it 100% of the time. So that's kind of it for now. I think I've explained this pretty well. So when you're asking someone for magic, when you're asking someone for a spell, or when you're looking forward to my writings and perhaps my future grimoire, you need to be fully and utterly aware that this thing that is being given to you is their magic. It is my magic. It is a creation that speaks to me, and it is a form of art. And forms of art, all forms of art, not all of them are universal. Some of them are more universal than others. And when you see some modern art with some weird squiggles on the canvas, you might not like it, but someone else does. They see something you don't. And magic is no different. My magic may work for you, or it may not. Just like my artwork may do it for you, or it may not. There's no difference at all whatsoever. It's exactly the same kind of concept. So I hope this finds you well. Dark blessings to everybody, everybody at Dark Sorcery, everybody who's following me on Facebook. And to my haters, hey, fuck you. How you doing? Talk to you later. Bye.